Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to the AFB Leadership Talk, which is a program that is brought to you by the AFB Transcend Leadership Team. And these are straight talking conversations that we have with exceptional individuals to inspire us as leaders in our various fields and to gain as much insight as we can from the roadmaps that they share, which are as important for the community that AFB serves as it is for our speakers as well. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Emma Parr, and today's talk is about how we can stand firm in pride and power, our special Black History Month event and talk with our distinguished guest, Jeremy Crook OBA. Jeremy is the Chief Executive of the Action for Race Equality, ARA, which is a national charity that works collaboratively to ensure that Black, Asian, and mixed heritage young people succeed in their education and always have a pathway to good careers. The ARA delivers role models and mentoring programs with youth employment initiatives to grants and capacity building programs, and the DE&I training that's required for employers. Jeremy leads the ARA's policy and research and has expertise on race disparities in the labor market and criminal justice system. With over 35 years' experience of advising government and large organizations in actions to deliver ethnically equitable and inclusive workforces and services, Jeremy's roles have included the Home Office Strategic Race Board, Greater London Authority Violence Reduction Unit, the Partnership and Reference Group in that unit, the Newham Commission on Inclusion and Belonging, and he also serves as a trustee for West Ham United Foundation. I'm sure you're all giving Jeremy a massive AFB welcome in your own way. But just a little bit of housekeeping before I invite him. I have the amazing Tammy who's working in the background on the more administrative function during today's talk. And if you have any questions, please send them in the chat and we will have some time with Q&A with Jeremy, which includes your questions at a particular point in this conversation. But right now, I want to hand it back to our guests and welcome again, Jeremy, to this highly anticipated talk. I'm sure this is one of your busier times of the year.
Yeah, it certainly is. And just say thank you very much for the invitation to speak. It's a real honour. I've known the association for quite a long time, through Nick A in particular. So I'm really pleased to be participating in this conversation today. So thank you for the invitation.
No, thank you very much for having us. I'm sure your calendar is chock-a-block. So it's very good that we got you on the first day of Black History Month. And I know that we have already just heard a very, almost a brief summary, an overall view of your background. But I wonder if you could give us a bit more insight into how you got
there. Yeah, thank you. I think my journey started off in the late 1970s when I left school, essentially with no qualifications. And I kind of reflected when I was 16 and had no direction. I wanted to be a professional footballer or a car mechanic, and none of those things worked out. And long story short, I ended up in further education, kind of retaking my O-levels or GCSEs at the time. I kind of realised the penny dropped with me, I think when I was about 17 or 18, that no one's going to do anything for you in this world. You've got to obviously work it out yourself. I did have a very supportive, loving mother from a lone parent family, 5 children. We were on welfare benefits for a good 10 years, so it was really tough. It was a supportive household. But I think what I realised at that age was you are on your own when you leave school. If you stay in education, you need to start making decisions. You need to start kind of figuring out how you're going to get to where you want to get to. I never had a kind of real career plan. I wasn't even clear what kind of subjects I enjoyed doing or what I was good at. I knew I wasn't very good at science subjects, and I don't dislike science or maths, but it just didn't kind of seem like a forte that I was good at or encouraged to do at school. So, but I ended up in the kind of arts, doing kind of law and sociology, and I realised that I did have a passion for that and an interest, and I focused on those kind of subjects, and eventually got to Polytechnic and to university to do a master's degree in ethnic relations a long time ago. But throughout that, I think what was the driver for me was so many young people in this country, particularly from black backgrounds, but white and Asian backgrounds as well, aren't given the support and the encouragement to kind of be successful and pursue the careers they want to pursue. And I got involved in a local black charity in my hometown in the West Midlands and started volunteering and going back to schools and talking to young people like myself to say, think about it. You might have teachers that don't like you. You may have teachers that are racist and sexist. But at the end of the day, they have their education. If you come out of school after 11 years of education with nothing, you're going to have a hard life, not the teachers that you think have been difficult or a barrier. So think about that and make the most of your time in education. And I think that's where my leadership started to grow and develop, just volunteering in secondary schools for 12 months when I was doing my GCSEs and A-levels. And I kind of liked the public speaking, I liked interacting with other young people and trying to motivate them, inspire them. All backgrounds, they wouldn't allow us to go and speak to just black young people in the early 80s. And I didn't want to. I wanted to speak to all young people because I was, I'm a working class guy myself, these working class communities. And the funny thing is to come back now to kind of, I think, race and class dynamic in this country. It's always been there, and I think that motivated me to try and do what I could in terms of my skills and education to make a difference. And I ended up moving to London when I finished my studies and getting the jobs in the voluntary sector, doing kind of race equality work and research. And I just genuinely enjoyed doing the kind of research and gathering evidence and speaking to leaders and local authorities and career services and government departments, and found that I was driven to do that. It's and I've done it for over 30 odd years now, and that's what I think motivates me, is to kind of see the change and see the barriers removed and more pathways for young people to kind of get on in life and be independent and be make a good contribution to their own communities, but also society.
It's just so much there that I'm very interested to talk to you more about. Having done this for 30 years, you've obviously been leading in this space, and you have, as you said, seen almost the same cycles being repeated. Today's conversation, I think, is just very important about sparking meaningful dialogue around leadership, racial justice, and legacy, in line with our theme for Black History Month, which is standing firm in power and in pride. What would you say has been the legacy for the Black community, in terms of racial justice? And I think we should just hit the hard topics straight off the bat. What is the legacy that you have witnessed in the last 3 decades?
Yeah, that's a really, really important question, isn't it? Which I do think about a lot. I remember probably 25 years ago when David Lammy became an MP for the first time in representing Tottenham, and he came to our national conference, which we held every year in Birmingham. And I think I asked David a similar question in terms of what would you like to achieve as an MP, because he was quite a young MP. And he said he would like to kind of create a black middle class in Tottenham, in Haringey. That would be a good legacy. And I think about that comment now and then. And I think in terms of Black communities and African heritage, I think the struggle was always about, I think, representation and equal treatment in society, but certainly in the workplace, and getting into all positions at all levels and leadership roles. And I think there's obviously been some success in that direction. certainly with the help of legislation, but we're still a long way from where we need to be. But there is a strong black middle class in the country now. I think we'd all agree with that. A very well educated black middle class as well. I think, and that's, I think, growing and an important legacy. There's obviously a disproportionate number of our community who are still in low income situations and in poverty disproportionately, but there's a strong educated middle class. And I was always interested in the economic empowerment. I was highly influenced by the kind of post-war black leaders in Africa and the Caribbean and America, especially Malcolm X and his writings and speeches. And I think economic empowerment and business growth have always been things that my charity has been championing. We used to be called the Black Training and Enterprise Group, BTEC, for quite a long time, until we changed the name of the charity 3 or 4 years ago. And the enterprise in the name was always very important to me. So encouraging entrepreneurship and business growth, especially in this country, but wherever we are as African heritage people, I think is really important, because I do think that brings power rather than just political representation, which I think has brought limited influence. I think we did focus a lot in this country on political representation. Obviously, we had 4 black MPs back in the 80s, and I've got to meet and know some of those. Some what has passed, but that was really important, that representation in the political sphere. But I think we probably didn't look at the economic sphere as much as we did on the political aspects to get black representation where it should be in terms of business growth. And I definitely know that we've always had high aspirations in this country in terms of black communities, but that's often not being realized in reality. I think that's slowly changing. We've got some very dynamic entrepreneurs now and younger people using technology in their education much more wisely, I think, and that's good to see. But we need to do a lot more, I think. So in terms of what I see in terms of leadership and legacy, I think we're getting stronger and stronger, albeit under a lot of pressure. And education is obviously a key part of that. Just looking at your website today, I think how many fantastic people on your website with all their qualifications and experience and knowledge. It's very impressive. We didn't have that, I don't think, but 30 years ago, in terms of all of that kind of just in one organization, one association, all that wonderful talent that can inspire young people in our community and outside our community, hopefully.
I like the fact that economic enterprise is something now that we're paying attention to. But I will admit, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will agree with me, it's hard to stay focused and motivated when the resources are limited and the challenges, they still persist. So as a successful leader, what would be the important qualities that are needed to succeed in that space?
I think for me, fundamentally, I think what's kept me going and sustained me as a leader is you've got to have your integrity, haven't you? You've got to be honest with yourself and honest with the people around you. You've got to be motivated and have a kind of vision of where you want to be, what you want to achieve, albeit small scale or big scale. And I think you've also, I try my best to encourage and inspire everyone I come into contact with, whatever age, and they obviously inspire and encourage me, whatever age and background and gender. So I think those things are really important, and I think that's what sustained me to kind of keep motivated. I do get asked now by younger people, how could you do what you're doing for 40 years? It can be traumatizing talking about race and racism every single day almost, and then still in life you deal with it on a day-to-day basis and you see it and you feel it. I think at the end of the day you've got to be resilient, haven't you? Resilience is very important, and so many of our people work hard to get where they've got to, but then face the challenge of just staying where they've arrived at as leaders or successful people, and get undermined and we get our intelligence questioned, and are we equal to white people? And the Charlie Kirk young man who was assassinated. I saw one clip on YouTube, which really I thought was really disgusting, in the sense that someone asked him about, I think, race equality and black people, and he made a reference to, if he got on an aeroplane and saw a black pilot, he'd want to see his qualifications because he may have gone through affirmative action programs and therefore may not be qualified to kind of pilot an aeroplane. I found that really insulting. You know what I mean? It just makes you wonder how far we've come in terms of how we are perceived as being equal human beings on this planet to everyone else, and especially white Europeans. And I don't know, in the subconscious of people, still, I think we still get treated less favorably in many spheres of life. And I wonder what's behind that and how much of that is conscious and unconscious, which we hear lots about. But, I think that drives me a lot to kind of see that we've still got much work to do in terms of our education system and the way we perceive each other in the society, and maybe within our own communities, because we get conditioned ourselves to not have the same strength of belief in our own capabilities and our own ability to achieve things and be successful and run our own countries and run our own businesses. I think we still get questioned about that. I mean, maybe we ask questions ourselves and undermine ourselves sometimes, who knows? But I just think the system itself is still geared to kind of hold us back far too much. Maybe there'll always be an element of that, but it still feels like it's a big barrier to overcome. I think we're doing as much as we can within reason, but we've got to definitely, obviously, we've got to work together, and we've got to have allies with us and behind us and in front of us. And I think that's really important. We spend a lot of time on the Windrush scandal. In fact, I was at a meeting till 8 p.m. last night in my office, listening to some of the victims of the Windrush scandal, and it's unbelievable to see what Black and other ethnicities have gone through, particularly Black people, particularly of Caribbean origin, in terms of having their status denied and having lived here for decades and still not being treated as a citizen and being deported, losing their jobs, losing their housing. And obviously some have passed away, sadly. But I heard from a young woman who's in her 20, I think she was 23, came here when she was 6 years of age. And she's got a small child now, and she's going through hell, basically, and feels totally uncertain and insecure about her situation in this country. And she's been here, nearly 2 decades, whatever it is, and been traumatized. And I just think, how are we putting people through that trauma and uncertainty still, despite all the attention the Windrush scandal has had publicly, and with all the government commitments to kind of remedy and bring justice? We seem to be far away from justice, and even we've got young victims still. These are not people in their 70s or 80s. These are like in their 20s who've been impacted by the scandal and not having their documentation, or their parents not having the documentation, which has impacted on their citizenship. Really, really, really difficult. And I just think we've got too many people are suffering still. So yeah. But, sorry, go on.
Please continue.
No, it's okay. I just think what I do try and do is look to the positives as much as we can on a daily basis as a leader, because we're working with young people. It's our job to kind of give them belief in themselves, and that things have certainly improved from when we started this journey in the post-war period. And we just got to keep battling. Not everyone wants to take on the struggle. I get that. They just they've worked hard. They've got their education, they've hopefully got a good job or profession, and they're doing well. They may think keeping their head below the parapet is the sensible thing. Why take on even more stress and trauma trying to deal with racism? But I think many of us and people in professions and in all walks of life, I think, sometimes you just got to stand up for what's right and make a difference. And hopefully you'll get the support for that, but sometimes you don't. And it's a heavy toll to pay for a lot of people in the workplace who do try and challenge, racism institutionally and individual. It does take its toll. And I just think, we need to make sure we've got the support networks in our communities to help each other to kind of deal with that. And just because you are successful or a professional or a leader doesn't mean you're not immune from all of that stuff and that mental stress. I don't think it may be even greater, who knows, but we definitely need to make sure we've got the infrastructure there to support that. And enable us to move forward and keep feeling that we are making progress, which in many ways we are. So I think the positives should be always flagged up as well.
I agree. It's good to increase the motivation as much as possible. And just before this call, I was telling you about how I'm trying to be very solution oriented in these very mentally stressful times. However, and at the same time, much as like you've just described, a lot of this is a trauma response in one sense. And of course, there's the aspect of trying to stay positive, but then we keep hearing that the United Kingdom is a post-racial society. How would you respond to that, just in light of everything that's happening in our current climate?
Well, I definitely don't think we're in a post-racial society, unfortunately. I wish we were, but I think you can see, obviously, I spend a lot of time looking at race and racism and analyzing data and working with people and governments trying to overcome the issues that we face. And so for me, and listen to the political debates, I do feel race is never too far from the political agenda. It's always there or thereabouts, and politicians will bring it out when it serves their purpose to bring it out and exploit it. And over the last 30, 40 years, obviously they've done that, maybe from the 1950s onwards. And so I'm always whenever you analyze history in this country, you can see when race gets kind of brought out and gets up the agenda. It's fairly frequently, unfortunately, and immigration. And, we seem to be the scapegoats for when there's economic problems and other problems. And yes, there's definitely an issue with people risking their lives crossing the channel in those dangerous contraptions. I'd like that to stop, just because on a humanitarian level, it's absolutely dangerous. But people are prepared to take that risk. And, we all ask ourselves, why would you do that? And you listen to the people who are doing it and taking the risk and taking loans out to pay the traffickers, etc. It's a complicated, difficult story. Yes, clearly there's genuine people there seeking, asylum and refugee status, but there's also a fair number of economic migrants. I think that's reasonable to say. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that there are routes and pathways into Western societies that are, accessible and fair, because we do seem to be quite selective in some of the way we manage our immigration system. I think there's clear evidence that post-war immigration policy has been racist in this country. It's been designed to keep out black and brown people, essentially. And it's that's what it's been designed to do, and that's what it's done very often. So we still need to kind of reflect on policies. But I definitely don't think we're in a post-racial society. I think we can see from the debates going on now that we're not in that place. And I think what makes it interesting is probably that we didn't expect 5, 10 years ago is that we've got black and Asian people speaking on the other side of the argument, which we probably thought. I didn't anticipate that would be the situation, but I also didn't anticipate we'd have a kind of British Asian Prime Minister or African heritage Chancellor. These are in many ways positive things. But you just wish that they would be, from my point of view, I don't judge people's political persuasions, and I run a charity, so we have to stay fairly neutral. But we'd expect to see black and Asian people in all political mainstream parties. That's fair to say, and there are. But we know that certain parties get more votes than others from certain communities, and that's the reality. That may be all be changing. Who knows? We haven't got two parties now. We've got more than two parties that are competing for to be governments. So it's going to be really difficult times ahead. But unfortunately, I do think race will play a big part of that as we run up to the next election. Unfortunately.
So we have to keep standing firm in power and in pride, and we have to lead in times of crisis. I know that you are a champion of humility and leadership, and I know that's one of your keynote addresses during Black History Month 2024. How can that principle guide our response to the current unrest?
I think we have to be forthright. We have to be robust. We have to be honest and share our views and look to the fairest and most equitable solutions, I think, and make sure that we don't undermine communities and ourselves. Because I think, very narrow-minded leaders will produce very narrow-minded solutions, I think, which won't benefit society as a whole. I think I'm thinking a lot now about class and the white working class and how we build and mobilize a greater number of people behind equality and fairness. There's been a lot of attacks on equality, diversity, inclusion from America and Trump and reform, and that is having an impact. That's impacting on us in this country through American companies and their supply chains, and things are being rolled back directly. So, what Trump says does have an impact, unfortunately, on the way we get treated here. So I'm mindful of that. I do think we've got to kind of think about the way we articulate what I do, because we're talking often about Black and Asian communities, and clearly there are large numbers of white people who are in poverty in this country. Numerically, they're the majority of people in poverty. So I think where we can, we shouldn't lose sight of the context that we live in, and talk about white communities when it's appropriate to do so in terms of disadvantage. Social mobility isn't good in this country for working class people, and from all ethnic backgrounds. The class system is very powerful, and I'm against snobbery and classism completely. And but even within, I've been to meetings with most of our own people and seen people look at my name badge and walk past me because I think what's that kind of non-entity charity that you're representing? You don't sound like you work for an important organisation, and people walk by because they don't feel like they need to talk to you, because who are you really running a small charity? I understand some of that, but I value everyone I meet and happy to meet anyone. If you're the Prime Minister, good to meet you. If you're the person securing a door in a building, I'm happy to have a chat with you, or a bus rider, taxi driver, doctor, engineer, whatever it may be. For me, every human being has got the equal value at the end of the day. I get status, I get professions, I get, hierarchies. I'd like to kind of see less of them. But I do think we've got a snobbery in this country that some of us perpetuate unnecessarily. Do you know what I mean? Even within our own communities. And that could be on different levels, whether it's class, education, faith, whatever. There are lots of kind of inequalities that we should talk about and not ignore, even within our own communities, I think. And colorism is another one, isn't it? We do we really deal with colorism in our communities and our families? I'm not sure we do, or talk about it, but I get the bigger picture. Systemic racism and institutional racism are things that we want to kind of, we do focus on a lot because that makes sense too. That impacts on our quality of life and opportunities. But there are other things that we need to. Sexism is a big problem. Violence against women and girls. I spend a lot of time thinking about that and what we do within our own communities. We developed a leadership program for Black and Asian young people last year, which we piloted. Part of that for me was, how do we kind of educate, raise awareness amongst our Black boys and young Black men to treat women and girls properly and fairly throughout their lives, and not resort to any violence whatsoever. But we've got an issue there because data shows that Black women are disproportionate victims of domestic violence in this country, especially in London. And if the perpetrators of that are Black men, then we've got a challenge within our communities to address that at early days, when with our boys and young men, not when we're middle-aged and my age. We need to deal with it obviously at source, and I don't think we're dealing with it the best we can. I'm not sure what all the solutions are. I just feel we need more programs and work in that space. It's probably why I helped create something called Black Men for Change in London, which was seeking to bring together an intergenerational grouping of younger Black men and older Black men, and just talking and listening to each other and seeing what we can do in those spaces around leadership, around sexism and misogyny, and talking about that. And I think there's still a lot to do in that space. And I think we should all be looking at that, whatever walk of life we're in or whatever profession, because it obviously impacts on all of us and our families. And it's not about how educated you are, because there's no barriers to domestic violence because of education, of course. But certainly, I think there's issues in terms of poverty and domestic violence and not having money to kind of pay your way and fund support yourself and your families. Those all impact, I think.
I love that. Just the concept of stepping down from the soapbox and just taking a clear-eyed look around us and saying where it is that we can start to solve communal issues, systemic communal issues, I should say, rather than, just taking the passion and pointing it in just one direction. And just for anyone who's listening, it's not a small charity, I can assure you of that. Jeremy, you have led the Moving Up program, which is a flagship initiative. Can you just tell us a little bit about what impact it has had and just what's next for what you're doing?
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, the Moving On Up project came about after Sol Campbell, the professional footballer for Arsenal in England. He kind of was a journalist on the Panorama program, I think it was back in 2013, which looked at black youth unemployment for young black men, which was over 50% in 2013. And it was a Panorama program, and we helped with the journalism, and we were interviewed with a few other black people on the program. I think 2 million people watched that program, but we only got two calls after the program went out.
Harsh.
One was from one was from Trust for London, a funder in London, and the other was from Job Centre Plus in London. And they called me and said, what can we do, Jeremy, then to what more can we do to address the problem? Long story short, I think over a 10-year period, we funded three interventions of the Moving On Up project and tried different approaches. And we helped, in the end, around 600 young black men into work through our partners who were doing the kind of job brokerage locally. We produced a film called The Black Talent Gap, which is on YouTube, highlighting a young black male seeking work with, he's graduated and still not finding a job. And there was a narrative around that. We did a kind of behavioral insights project where we observed employers talking about race and diversity and observed their attitudes towards that. I do recall one observation I attended in London with a focus group of employers, and there was a middle class tech guy who had his own tech business, and he was asked, "Do you employ any young black men in your business?" And he said, "No." And he said, they asked him, "Would you employ a young black man in your business?" It's a tech business. I think they employed 40 people. He said, "If I were to employ a young black person, he would have to work 110% harder to prove to me that he could do the job." And I thought, was it 2023, 2022? This is a young middle class entrepreneur, but this is his attitude of young black men, that they would have to work harder than a white young man to prove to him that they could do the job. And I just thought, we talked about attitudes at the beginning and perceptions and stereotypes of our people. And it's just that even on that level, when you're just having a conversation, he's got a view about young black men, even though he's never worked with one. He hasn't got a friend who's a young black male, but that's his view, his expectation that he would have to be that much better than a white young man. So the Moving On Up project, we've learned a lot over the years. We've got various reports and evaluations. We did spend a lot of money trying to kind of understand why do employers behave in a certain way towards young black men? Why are they reluctant to talk about race and young black men? And we produced toolkits with the Mayor of London, and they're all very good. And what you find, Emma, is that employers, even those who are leading on diversity and inclusion, they keep asking for more best practice, more toolkits. There are brilliant toolkits in this country now, for almost in every sector, on race and gender and disability. There is no shortage now of tools and assets to help employers do the right thing. But for some reason, they don't do it still. In most cases, they don't do it. And I think we've got over 1,000 employers now sign up to the Business and the Community Race at Work Charter, which is a very good, nice charter. You sign up to it, but it's quite hard to verify with data what employers are actually doing in terms of recruitment, retention, and progression still. And I think we still find it hard in the workplace to talk about race and numbers and data. You guys are, engineers. You look at the data, look at systems and processes. I think we've got very good at doing that in diversity now. So I think we understand the problems and where they are occurring, but it's the lack of will to take action to remedy the situation, I think, is the biggest challenge still.
So, as someone who is clearly passionate about data and who relies on the real statistics out there, what are the urgent reforms that we need to see from our current government, for instance, just to address the situations where grassroots organizations who are coming up after yourselves are in a better place to support young people who are affected by racial violence and exclusions?
Yeah, no, really important question. I think the legislation that we've got in this country is not fit for purpose, especially in the public sector. The Public Sector Equality Duty of the Equality Act 2010, which covers 9 protected characteristics, it's almost like an optional menu. You do not have to focus on race if you don't want to, if you're a public body. And we've seen time and time again, for example, in policing and the Met Police in particular, despite the Lawrence inquiry, despite the Race Relations Amendment Act, despite the Equality Act, they still have been shown to be institutionally racist. I think there's a program out tonight on Panorama highlighting another set of issues in London, a London police station that was highlighted by Baroness Casey 3 years ago, I think it is now. So the legislation is not fit for purpose. And especially if you work in the public sector, you can see that. There is no real accountability, no real requirement to kind of look at the data and say, well, there is a disparity. We've got so few senior Black leaders in this organization. We are bound to now take action to remedy that. It's optional. And you could have one objective if you're a public authority on any of those protected characteristics over 4 years. So it's not transformational. We produced a very good paper on this, by the way, if anyone's interested to read about our articulation of why the public sector equality duty is not effective. It doesn't tackle institutional racism. I have met with the Minister for Race and talked about the paper and the recommendations. As you know, the government is planning to introduce ethnicity pay gap reporting and disability pay gap reporting. But if there is no requirement to have an action plan with that reporting, what will change? What will drive employers who employ 250 people to do anything about the gap if there are gaps in pay, which I suspect there will be in many organizations? So we are messing around on the margins or the fringes of legislation. I will welcome ethnicity pay gap reporting because at least there will be data in organizations to use to show disparities, which then can be a lever, I hope, to look at other things about, the supply side, the progression through organizations. Why does it seem to stop at a certain place for Black people and not for other ethnic groups? So all of those things will be important. And, entry-level opportunities, graduates, apprenticeships, all of these things matter, don't they? I know they matter to the association as well. So that will be helpful, but we're a long way from where we need to be.
And I have heard a lot of people in this space say that a lot of things that were moving in the right direction in the past are no longer happening now. And this is actually the time. We're actually in the era where these things should be happening. We have so many questions within the very limited time that we have with you, Jeremy, and I don't want to leave the audience out of this. I know we've got a few questions in the comments, but before I get to that, I know that you've often spoken directly to young people, and that's obviously your passion points. There's a lot of disillusionment, but like I said, we're here with the initiative to start to look towards solutions. So, how can we, or what message would you pass on to not just young people, but to Black community leaders who are in charge of motivating young people so that they can turn those feelings of disillusionment or feeling unsafe in today's Britain in such a way that they sell or they continue to promote ethnic diversity, not to not be seen as a threat, but as a strength in shaping our future?
Yeah, no, it's really important. I do think we can all collaborate more across sectors and associations and staff networks. I think that's really important. We're trying to do that ourselves at the moment. We're working with a company called Share Action and Diane Grayson, who's been leading on the ethnicity pay gap stuff. We're trying to bring together staff networks, particularly in the private sector, but also the public sector, just to kind of share ideas, what we can do to use the legislation on pay gap reporting to kind of lever greater change and system change. I think role models are really important, aren't they? That we've got more visible role models in all walks of life and all professions. And I know you do your fair share in engineering. Use our celebrities, use our high profile people to kind of get the messages across. You know, Lewis Hamilton did some great work with his commission that I know the association was a member of, Nicola, and myself. He's obviously still doing great work through his foundation in education, getting more STEM teachers into education and into obviously motorsport and all the rest of it. So I do value celebrities who are very wealthy doing things. Maybe they should fund some more charities as well to do more work. I get why people tend to set up their own foundations. I understand that if you're a wealthy person, but sometimes fund what's already there as well. You know, grow our great associations like yours and my small charity. Put some investment there so we can do more. We keep creating more and more and more charities and foundations, which is not a bad thing, but scale. We haven't got the scale, and I think when I go to America and see, you know, black organizations, whether it's businesses or business organizations or charitable organizations, they've got scale. They do things on a much bigger scale where we are 5 people, 10 people, 15 people. You know, we should be 200 people, 300 people doing some of this work, not small scale, marginalized activities, which we're often struggling against for sustainability. So, you know, how we kind of bring in all of our players on our team, I think is really important locally and nationally. So the more events we can do to highlight successes, find solutions, I think is really important. But we should never go to an event that's looking at the issues without finding solutions. Young people need to come out with solutions, and they've got some ideas, obviously, themselves that we need to listen to and hopefully support and get behind. You know, I'm not too far from retirement myself. You know, 5 years. I want to make sure we've got leaders coming behind me, and I believe we have in all walks doing what they can do to make a difference in their respective lives and careers. You know.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. I'm going to take a couple of questions out of the comments section and there's lots of engagements. Thank you all so much. You've been very interactive during this conversation and there's a lot to share. There was one question about how Black leaders can support other Black professionals in the workplace. And this person says that they have always received poor feedback and poor treatment from the, I would expect, Black leaders in that same space and now prefer a Caucasian boss. What would you say or what would you advise them?
Yeah, I think I have met some really positive black leaders. Not many, particularly in the public sector, unfortunately, but there are some, and director generals in the civil service in Whitehall and local authorities, chief executives or deputy chief executives. Some of them, get into a mindset where they feel they've got to distance themselves from black staff networks and black staff directly, and I've spoke to some over the years that wouldn't overtly link themselves to race equality issues in their workplace as leaders. And I understand why they might find they've got to find a way of surviving as leaders and being themselves, or just wearing a different hat at work that they would wear in their personal lives. Code switching, is that what young people use that word, code switching, I think? And as leaders, I mean, how many times do leaders have to code switch? I don't think that's the right way myself, obviously, but I'm not running a large Whitehall department or a big business. I don't know what shapes their mindset, but I would like them to be proud of who they are and be proud to associate with people that look like themselves and help them to kind of navigate the career ladder and barriers and opportunities and be encouraged to do so, because that's why they are role models, or they should be role models. That means taking an interest in people, obviously everyone in the workforce, but there will be additional challenges for your own people in these situations because you've been through it yourself probably, and therefore what can be done to minimize those barriers, encourage and support people that look like you to have less stress getting to where they want to get to. But if you ignore that and turn your back on that, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, but you're also doing our community a disservice, because we do need people to look back and keep that ladder open and not shut it off. We do get into that mindset, the only person in the village kind of mindset, that we like to be the first black person to do this and the first to do that, which is, I understand that. I haven't got a problem with that. I mentioned to you before we started, Emma, I went to the unveiling of a blue plaque in Mayfair of Winifred Atwell. It was a fantastic Caribbean heritage musician in the 1950s and 60s who had great success in music and sold over 1 million records in the 1950s. I think she was the first musician to do that. Opened a black hair salon in London as well. I think the second black women's hair salon in the country in the 1950s. She was a real pioneer and opened, they created pathways for other black women and black people generally to go on and be successful in music and in business. We know we've got a lot of people that have done that. So I look to our generation today to do the same, or if not better, because we've learned a lot from history and we should be applying that in our current situations effectively. So I do judge leaders, and I want to see them to I want them to be the best they can be as leaders. And, yes, make your business profitable and more profitable if that's what you're there to do, and lead it. If it's a public service, make it the best public service it can be for everyone, because we're all about everyone benefiting. But at the same time, come on, use your insights as a black person to kind of remove the barriers for other black people.
You would think it's common knowledge, and unfortunately, I think it's just the fear of standing out that just tends to seize quite a lot of professionals or leaders in certain minority exempt spaces. I've got another comment here about the persistent data gap in gender and race equality, which is a key challenge in advancing EDI in higher education, particularly in engineering. Do you want to comment on that at all?
I appreciate that. I was part of Theresa May's initiative, which created the website in the government called Ethnicity Facts and Figures, which is still operational, which does have education data. But I appreciate, particularly in higher education, there are serious systemic problems for Black academics in terms of recognition and progression and getting through to the highest levels still. And I think that's really important. So I think the data is really critical in sharing the data at the highest levels in HE as well as in school level. I spend a lot of time looking at free school meal data and just looking at the high numbers of Black African Caribbean children, especially boys, who do not succeed in education at GCSE level who are on free school meals. It's nearly half. It's unbelievable. African boys is much better. I think it's around 30%. But why some groups still struggle so badly, especially those on low income families, is critical. I think that we kind of start to improve that. But in higher education, I think the issues have been flagged up for so long now. I've listened to so many Black academics share their frustrations or their part-time contracts, of the lack of research opportunities, lack of progression. And it seems to me there is a lot of institutional racism in our education, particularly where people don't think they're racist because they're intellectuals. I find that incredible.
I've got a couple of comments also on the gender pay gap, but I think we will just move on because quite a lot of these are probably just discussion points between the people in the chat themselves. Um, I did see a question about the recent offshore wind conference. I don't know if you would have anything to contribute to that, but the writer was shocked at the fact that they counted less than five black or brown people over 2 days. And there was, yeah, that there needs to be, I think she meant to say there needs to be far more representation. And how can we change that? But I don't know if you are in the best position to give your thoughts on that industry at all, but just a general
I think,
comment, I suppose.
yeah, no, my general comment is I when I hear about events like that and see coverage, and especially in critical sectors, when it's energy and growth, and I spent a lot of time in the water sector with Thames Water, looking at the challenges that they face. There's a massive engineering feat that goes on in water management, which some of you may know about. But I was very impressed with all of that. I just want to see our people in all of these spheres represented, especially where it's innovation, where there's innovation and future opportunities and growth. Clearly, that all of those things are going to keep growing, aren't they? You know, the electrification of everything and cars. I would like to see us playing our role and benefiting from that, and both in in terms of innovation and manufacturing, and obviously our countries of origin. I think love to see. We seem to be a place where we just get extraction from Africa and not manufacturing and development. I may be wrong. I'm not that knowledgeable about it, but what I pick up is superpowers just coming to Africa to exploit the resources and not do as much as they probably could do to invest in the people and grow our own businesses in our own countries that can kind of put us on the global scale. So we are talked about when we talk about global economic powers. Africa is never mentioned at all, is it? It's China, Russia, Brazil, India, America, and obviously Europe. Africa seems to be nowhere in that conversation, which we must start to try and change over the next 10, 30 years, I think. If not, if it's changing now, great. There might be, people who've got a lot more connection than I have. I just feel saddened and frustrated that we don't seem to talk about Africa in terms of economic growth and the future solutions for the planet.
So, what advice would you give to young Black leaders who are listening right now who want to make that difference but feel unheard and unsupported?
I think, have no fear. I think you've got to kind of stick to your passion, do what you need to do, talk to the right people, get the right mentors, get the right coaches, but be driven to get where you want to get to. If that's what you believe you can make a contribution to, and you've got the intellectual capacity, the right education, and you're doing everything right, then just drive forward and get the support you need and the encouragement, and don't be deterred. I think, I listen to some of these obviously very successful entrepreneurs, and some of them I don't like personally, but they've obviously been very successful. Some of them have had doors open for them, and had investment from their wealthy parents, but, not all of them. But we have got, wealthy people in our communities. So, and they've probably got some very smart, siblings, etc. And what we need to make sure we're doing everything that we can. I'm sure we are as parents doing what we can for our children, but we've got to give them encouragement and don't deter them because we think it might be too hard or too risky. If you've got your education, then you obviously got a foundation. And I think that's my message to young people. Do what you want to do in life, but try and make sure you've got a foundation to fall back on, or a profession. And that will always be a helpful thing, I think.
And as a personal reflection, as we quickly draw into a close now, what does standing firm in power and pride mean at this stage in your career? You spoke a few minutes ago about getting close to retirement. What is that statement, the theme of Black History Month for you personally?
I think I've always classed myself as Black British. I'm mixed heritage, Black Guyanese mother and a white father, but I was raised by my mother. I'm proud. I'm proud of my African heritage, and that's really important to me to have pride in yourself and love yourself. And whether you're Black and or mixed, I think I do meet young people who struggle with identity in this country still, and that really does kind of make me annoyed that people don't feel proud of themselves, and that it's reinforced on a daily basis, whether they're mixed or Black or whatever their ethnicity, from our communities. I think so. Standing firm in yourself, I think that's what it means to me, and be proud of who you are, whatever your ethnicity. I think I was listening to Morgan Freeman, who said, he's not an African American, he's an American. And I kind of understand what he's saying, but you know what? I am proud to say I've got African heritage, and albeit it's come through South America from Guyana, but my ancestors came from Africa on my African side, and I'm proud of that. And I think we should make sure that all our children are proud of their ancestry, and especially those from the Caribbean, I think maybe more distant from Africa in the connection there. I think education hasn't really enlightened us as much as we should enlighten each other about our history and connection to Africa. So I think Black History Month in that sense, I think is really important, and we shouldn't ever be ashamed to kind of make the connections to Africa, and obviously those who are African heritage directly. That's obviously wonderful. But for those of us who have come through slavery as a pathway to where we are, then I think we need to always remember that and be proud of that.
We would easily spend another hour just quizzing you and getting into the depths of your experience and trying to get as much knowledge as we can in this space. We are unfortunately running out of time. I did have one last question in the comments, and I may just quickly paraphrase it. The person is asking, and maybe that's just building off your answer just now, how they can build resilience and educate the community on the positives that are found in continuing to engage with these data inequality reports that are out there and making sure that they work for us so that we have a joined up voice. Hopefully, I've paraphrased that as well as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, use our networks. I'm on LinkedIn, so anyone that wants to connect with me, please do. And if I can connect you with other people that are in a better place to support and encourage and work with you, then I obviously will do that. You know, I
It's great.
I
You heard
do
it here.
I do look at my charity as we're a means to an end and not an end in itself. We're here to bring about change, not just be a little employing organization employing 20 people. We're here to make a difference, and that's what we need to judge ourselves on.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. It was a very special event, Black History Month, and we had the amazing Jeremy Crook with us. Final remarks, Jeremy, as you bid farewell and motivate the people to just run, run, run with all that resilience.
Yeah, well, again, Emma, thank you for wonderful interviews, really powerful questions, and I would just say keep doing what you're all doing in all your roles and jobs, and keep the work of the association going because it's so important. So I salute all the good stuff that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jeremy. Like I said, this was meaningful dialogue, which is needed, I think, by more than a few of us. So we really appreciate the time that you've given to us. And I would like to thank everybody else who has stayed with us for any portion of today's talk. We've come to the end of it. It's been an amazing evening. Happy Black History Month, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.